Joining us right now is Florida Congressman. He is a member of the House Oversight Committee and House Armed Services Committee, Michael Waltz. Congressman, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks, Maria.
And I know you've endorsed President Trump for his 2024 White House bid. Your reaction to what we saw last night?
Well, it was a double-digit victory, and it was on top of his historic win in Iowa. And, Maria, you know, we're going to hear a lot of chatter about the ability to persuade independents and that whole persuasion argument. But I think it really misses what really wins elections, which is the turnout piece and the enthusiasm. And I could tell you I haven't seen or experienced negative 30 temperatures like I did in Iowa since I was in Arctic warfare school in Alaska. And people were turning out in droves, and they were only turning out for Donald Trump. Only him could turn people out in those conditions. And it's that enthusiasm difference that we're seeing for him versus the others that I think is going to be the winner at the end of the day. People aren't enthusiastic about Joe Biden. And the other piece is the clear contrast. In the past, we were talking theoretically about what the progressives would do if they were in charge. Now we've had 3 years of it, and the contrast with how people's lives were under Trump and how they are now couldn't be more clear. I think that's going to bode very well for the next president, Donald J. Trump, in November.
Will Trump be able to pivot now to try to attract those independents? What about the whole donor class that is standing behind Nikki Haley?
Look, at the end of the day, they know, maybe they haven't come to terms with yet, that this is going to be a binary choice between the failures of the Biden administration and the successes of the Trump administration. And what I'm thrilled with from President Trump is he's saying, let's unite, let's win, and let's talk about all of the wins that we had in just 4 years, from the economy to the border to the Abraham Accords. I mean, the list is so long and the contrast is so clear about what works and what doesn't work. And I think as long as he stays on that, and I fully expect him to, he's going to be the overwhelming winner.
And you're talking about policy, and economic policy has been really negative for most American families. Foreign policy, same thing. The U.S. has now struck 3 facilities in Iraq used by the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militia. This happened yesterday. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says that the strikes are, quote, in direct response to a series of escalatory attacks against U.S. and coalition personnel in Iraq and Syria by Iranian-sponsored militias. Look, we're talking about 151 attacks on our troops in Iraq and Syria since October 17th. You know this, Congressman, and you know that this administration hasn't really responded. Now we're seeing the U.S. and the U.K. push back. The Iraqi government, however, reportedly condemning the U.S. strikes this morning. What is your reaction to how the U.S. has responded to all of these attacks on our troops, men and women in the Middle East?
Well, Maria, again, the contrast. No new wars under President Trump. Actually, in fact, peace breaking out across the Middle East with the Abraham Accords under President Trump. And now the entire region is on fire. Appeasement has failed. Appeasement has invited escalation by our enemies who smell weakness. And now we're backing ourselves into another endless war with the Houthis. On the one hand, President Biden admits that our strikes and our strategy isn't working. Yet, on the other hand, you have officials talking to the Washington Post saying, settle in for the long term. And you know what, Maria? You know what these forces aren't doing right now, the opportunity cost for this surge and another endless war in the Middle East? They're not dealing with China. They're not in the Indo-Pacific. Those ships aren't home in the shipyards getting refitted so that they can deal with the threat that could actually defeat us in the Chinese Communist Party. Meanwhile, those soldiers and sailors aren't at home. That one of the aircraft carrier crews were supposed to be home for Christmas. They were extended. So the opportunity cost from this failed strategy, which is not dealing with Iran and instead dealing with their proxies, has all kinds of costs for us around the world, and it's enormously frustrating. We're going to continue to conduct oversight from the Congress.
Well, let's not forget that this administration is many of the people who were in the Obama administration when it comes to foreign policy. I'm talking about Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, and they wanted to do a deal with Iran.
That's right.
Okay, they've been pursuing a deal with Iran, lowering sanctions, making it easier for Iran to generate billions in oil revenue. So no surprise that they have been so slow to respond.
As long as Iran is flush with cash, I mean, this is the bottom line, they are going to push that cash out to their terrorist proxies. And just a few years ago, under President Trump, we heard from Hezbollah to Hamas to the Houthis all complaining that they were out of money, that they couldn't buy the arms, that they weren't being provided with the resources that they wanted to conduct terrorism. Why? Because maximum pressure was working under the Trump administration. And then the same crew, you're absolutely right, that's been around under Obama since 2008 comes back in and goes back to appeasement. And once again, we see the region and the world on fire. It's just, yeah.
I know you're calling for a briefing on the deaths of 2 Navy SEALs. I want to get your take on that. They went missing during a nighttime raid on a ship off the coast of Somalia. What do you want to hear? Tell me about this in terms of what you still don't understand, how this took place.
Well, I want to understand what the risk assessment was, what the urgency was, and how widespread these activities are. I mean, we'll never get these SEALs back. How many more are being put at risk chasing the thousands of ships running around the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf that Iran is using to smuggle arms into the Houthis and into Hamas versus dealing with the root of the problem, which is Tehran, its sanctions evasion, and the fact that it has billions of cash. So how many more SEALs are we going to lose because of a failed strategy from this administration? And those are the types of questions we need to be asking. And I tell you what, as a 27-year special operator, I know the right questions to ask.
Yeah, I know you do. And, you know, last year the House passed the bill to harden the sanctions on Iranian oil. But this administration seems to have an issue responding to adversaries. We see it in communist China. We see it with Iran. Why?
Well, because at the end of the day, they believe if we can just make some concessions, if we can get our adversaries to the table, if we can be the nice guy in the world, that they'll follow our belief. And anybody who's dealt with the likes of the Chinese Communist Party, ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah knows that they smell weakness, they smell opportunity, and they're not just on the march right now. I think they're going to accelerate over this next year because they fear and respect Donald Trump. Yeah. And you didn't see any of this under his leadership.
All right, Congressman, it's great to get your insights on this. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks, Maria.
All right, Congressman Michael Waltz joining us.